bring us the girl and wipe away the debt. That was the deal.
You know, BioShock Infinite's a game where you play a character named Booker DeWitt, and you're sort of a bit of a rough and tumble guy, and you're a former Pinkerton agent. The year's 1912, and you get this mission to go to the city of Columbia, a flying city, to retrieve this girl, Elizabeth. And of course, when you get there, you find out things aren't all you thought they were. You probably saw like some people who are very connected to, their prophet, Father Comstock, who is, a sort of a charismatic religious figure. And there are some people who aren't happy with what's going on in the city. I don't want to do any plot spoilers, but you sort of encounter some of those people too. And there's some people who are very unhappy with what's going on in the city on the opposite end. So there's this huge story going on around you that you actually become quite instrumental in. But Booker's not there to save the world. He's not there to change the universe. He just wants to do his job and get out. And Elizabeth just wants to, the woman he sort of rescues, who's been in prison for years, just wants to live her life. She wants, to be in control of her own destiny. And they get caught between these two large forces. Comstock's people, they call themselves the Founders, and the Vox Populi, who are these two opposing forces. And Booker will work with whoever he needs to work with to, basically get what he needs, which is to get the girl back to the city, to New York, so in return for forgiveness of his gambling debt. So he's got a pretty basic motivation, but they just keep getting pulled further and further and further into what happens. When we started BioShock Infinite, we had a rule, which was there are no sacred cows. And BioShock's a little bit a different kind of franchise. It's not something that I think would do well with repeating, oneself, because part of the thrill of Rapture was this incredible new place. And so we started working on this game. We sort of had two rules we wanted to stick to, one is that it's a game set in an amazing environment with a ton of detail that you can just explore to your heart's content. And the other one was that you have this what we call improvisational combat, weapons in one hand and vigors in the other hand. And of course you have skylines and Elizabeth opening tears and the interactive environment and gear and all this incredible stuff. And so those were the only two rules we set out for ourselves of things that defined a BioShock game. But otherwise we really said, let's just come up with something completely new. And we sort of walked away from a lot of things that had given us a lot of comfort in the past. Like we made a game called System Shock 2 many years ago, and BioShock and System Shock 2 have a lot of similarities in the sense that there's a silent protagonist. They both take place in a world where almost everybody's dead because there's been some kind of catastrophe. And with this game, we said, well, okay, let's not have a silent protagonist. Let's make you inhabit a role. Let's not have you be alone. Let's have this woman, Elizabeth, with you. Let's not put you in a world where everybody's dead. Let's put you in a world that's still very much living and breathing, and you're very much responsible and involved in what happens in the changes in the city and the sort of the catastrophes that happen to the city. And that was, and turned out to be a large part of the work of making this game, and why it was a much more difficult game to make than BioShock 1, because it's so much more ambitious. I mean, Elizabeth alone is such, we set out this goal that she be your partner through this experience, and she's an AI, right? So, not only does she have this huge role in the narrative space, but she has to be, we wanted her to be as interested in the world as the player was, to pay attention to the world, to respond to the world. We wanted her to be involved in combat, not just sitting there like cowering or kill stealing from you. She doesn't share your ability. She has a whole different set of abilities. So she's opening tears in combat, which are these sort of extra dimensional portals that can bring in things into the combat that weren't there before, like reinforcements or turrets or supplies. She's running around and scrounging, ammo and health packs for you, and like tossing them to you in combat when you ask for them. She's, as you go around the experience, she's picking locks for you. She's cracking codes because she was stuck in this tower, this prison all these years. So she was kind of this little nerdy girl who was reading all these books about, code breaking and lock picking, and she had a lot of interests, and they come in handy during the progression of the game. You tell her which tears to open, that you're completely in control of that. You tell her which doors to pick the locks on because there's a resource, lockpicks attached to that. So you decide which ones you want to spend your lockpicks on. And generally you can see some things, but not all things that are on the other side of the door through a window or something. She offers you things up in combat, which you have the option to take or not. Like maybe you don't need that kind of ammo or something right now, or you want to pay attention because you have to turn, and she does this great thing where she sort of tosses it to you and you grab it out of the air. It's very much a game where you have a lot of say in her involvement, which I think is important. But she also, at the same time, feels like an independent actor in terms of both in the plot and just the fact that she's not. Most AIs in games, when you turn to them, they're doing this, right? Elizabeth is always engaged in the world. She's always, she looks at things, she interacts with things, she plays with things. Like there's a point where she comes to this arcade game and she starts playing with it. She talks to people. She goes by people who are smoking and she starts coughing. And this is, present throughout the entire game. People expect out of a BioShock game that they're going to be presented not just with gameplay, but with ideas. We try to make the games that talk about sort of present these very unique societies. In BioShock 1, it was sort of this underwater Ayn Randian objectivist utopia. And in this game, it's it's a city that's, an ultra-nationalist city founded by a charismatic religious leader. And there's very strongly held beliefs in these cities. And sort of watching what happens to, a very sort of idealistic place, and that's quite beautiful and stunning. Like when you first come out onto that street and you just see this beautiful scene, it's this beautiful place, and watching it sort of go through its crisis and being so involved in that is central. And I think that's really important, the sort of the crisis of cultures. And that sounds like, well, you can't really put that in the back of the box of a video game because who's going to buy that? But I think I think people do underestimate gamers' intelligence. And I think people were surprised when BioShock was as successful as it was, because people thought like, oh, gamers, all they want to do is like blow up, Taliban and jump over mushrooms. And I have no problem with, either one of the, I'm a gamer, I'm a hardcore gamer. But I think there was a market that wasn't served, which is, hey, let's challenge you, your manual dexterity, but let's also put you in a world that sort of presents some interesting questions. In BioShock 1, let's be honest, the game featured infanticide, which is about the largest taboo in the world. And the reason the universe didn't rise up in arms over it was because it was central to the story we were telling. And it was done in a style which all we had to do was let you know what you were doing. We didn't sort of show it graphically. And that's what it's always about for us. So what story are we telling? Now, you can't tell an honest story of the city of Columbia without bringing in elements of racial prejudice. It was part of America at the time. It was part of almost every country at the time. It's still part of many countries. But it was not just a virulent thing at the time. It was politicians who read Teddy Roosevelt's letter, who was quite a progressive president. He would openly refer to African Americans, Jews, etc., in terms now that if a politician said them, they would probably be career-ending. And they were men of their time. Abraham Lincoln, even though he was this incredible man who was had led the cause of abolition, viewed African Americans as sort of as he was a white supremacist, but he was a man of his time. But he also, he thought they should be free, but they were sort of a lesser race. And it's very hard to judge. Like Thomas Jefferson said, it's very hard to judge these people on the principles of how we live now. I'm of Jewish descent, and I think that the racism, at the time was huge. I've even seen it as I grew up. When I grew up in the '70s, I got a lot of guff about that. And we sort of evolve over time, and you have to be honest to the story you're telling.